You guys hear me? I can't hear you.
Yeah, if we got yes,
There we go. Okay.
and muted.
Yep.
We got Scott coming.
Are we good to go?
Yeah,
Okay. I will call to order the committee of the whole 246 for Tuesday, June 20th. And in honor of the Liwatul, the village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwat Nation. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, moved as presented. Councillor Caddick, seconded by Councillor Helmer. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from Committee of the Whole 245 from May 30th, moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Nightingale. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising? Seeing none, we are going to move right on to the 5.1, which is a hillside planning study. And Mr. McCray will be presenting to us today.
You.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Purpose of today's presentation is to respond to council direction to review the hillside area planning framework. So as you'll see, this report recommends a path forward in terms of the hillside area, updating the planning framework for that area. Get into some details here about how we see this coming together. So as a little bit of background, the hillside area is, as Appendix A shows, it's kind of made up of three active developments, or I should say 2 applications and 1 application that's expected imminently. So those applications are the Parkside project, the Redwoods project. So I should back up Parkside, 34 single family lots and 1 mixed use site. The Redwoods project is currently proposing 134 townhouse units. Those are both applications that are in-house. And Sunstone Phase 4, we understand, we're expecting the application anytime. All of these applications are in the urban growth boundary, but require OCP amendments to be to move forward. As council will recall, on April 25th, the Parkside application was presented to Committee of the Whole, and at the time, Committee of the Whole passed a resolution as it appears in this report, basically directing staff to explore and to review how the whole area is going to develop generally. And so we're talking about green space, recreation, trails, commercial, and sort of other non-residential aspects of the community, so that council can sort of see how the whole area is going to come together. So since that time, staff have been digging into the history, and as well, council received a delegation presenting much of that history, including history going back beyond the time this line has been in the village. And so that has been very helpful. Staff have taken all that information and are reviewing it, consolidating it. But you know, essentially everything, most of everything is there, I would say. We have, you know, infrastructure studies going back for 15 years that show how, you know, the water needs to this area, sewer needs to this area, stormwater will be managed. Lots of background on the recreation and the trails. So really, I think the conclusion from looking at the policy background is that there's a substantial amount of history here, and most of that, all of that can be used in terms of updating the planning framework for the hillside. So the current policy framework of the village in the hillside area is is a mention in the OCP, which is included in the report, as well as the Hillside Land Planning Status Report from July 2011, which was included in Appendix B of this report. And so, note this was not the Hillside Lands Planning Status Report was not a schedule of the OCP, and it does not really provide clear policy or guidelines that we would normally have to regulate development. It's effectively just providing guidance for future planning efforts in the area, and it does point to the need for OCP amendments for projects to proceed in this area. So that feel that the general approach of this hillside planning study is what we're calling it tentatively. So essentially, it's going to build on the history that has been presented and is available, and to take that history and consolidate it into one place, and then look through it and identify areas where it needs to be updated, anything that needs to be made more contemporary. So speaking to things that, essentially where there has been council planning initiative since those studies may have been completed. I think the ultimate deliverable will, essentially, importantly, it will be a schedule of the OCP. So that means that it, will live in the center of the village policy framework from now on, and it will be enforceable. The guidelines and policy statements in it will be enforceable going forward. And it will include discussion on those areas that council identified, or it will include policy and guidelines on those areas that council identified as being important. So the natural environment, trails, recreation, commercial, and I already said recreation. So ultimately, this is going to essentially come together similar to what the Nkukuma sub-area plan looks like, although probably on a smaller scale. So the general process of this effort is going to, start with that consolidation of all the history, and then we're going to have a look through and update any areas and apply that contemporary lens to modernize what we have, what we have available. And we'll look at crafting some development permit area guidelines to give council some additional tools in this area. We'll probably start with using the development permit area guidelines that were crafted for the Nkukuma sub-area plan to start. And then we'll look to release a draft version of this neighborhood plan. And that will, kick off referrals and consultation with the public. And after that, once we've allowed sufficient time and that is those processes will run their course, we can move towards bylaws. I feel that this is an opportunity to really get a good sense of what is happening on the hillside in a whole. These looking at each of these applications and then looking at how they will interact as a whole on the hillside. By undertaking this planning study, we'll have the opportunity to kind of give council a better sense of how this whole area is going to come together. So staff have met with the proponents who are here this afternoon and discussed the timing of the effort as well as how the funding of this effort might look. And so we're working towards moving it forward as quickly as we can. Understanding that some of the applications have been with us for some time and other applications we're still waiting for. But we see an opportunity in moving them all together at the same time here, and through essentially staff taking the lead on addressing these issues all at once rather than 3 times individually. And so, in a similar vein, talking about how this study will be funded, we've had preliminary conversations with the proponents that it would reflect how normal development planning is financed, so through cost recovery and covered by application fees. And So that is the bulk of the report today. I think the report provides two alternative options to council for consideration from the committee of the whole. So option one is that the committee of the whole recommend to council that staff be directed to initiate comprehensive neighborhood planning process, generally as described in this report. So the committee of the whole report dated June 23rd, June 20th, 2023. And that staff report back to the committee of the whole as needed for any additional direction regarding the project schedule and funding. Or option two is another course of action as determined by committee of the whole. And so staff recommending that committee of the whole consider option one. That we proceed with this hillside study planning largely as defined in this report. That concludes my presentation for today. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Open the floor for questions. Seeing no questions, I look for any comments. Is that your hand, Councillor Nightingale? No.
Sure, yeah, go ahead, Mike. Go, Mr. Mayor.
No, I thought I saw your hand. Go ahead.
You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm not seeing any comments or questions.
Sorry, I go. Yeah, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much to Mr. McCray for the report, and I want to I appreciate the future proofing that potentially will take place with this comprehensive plan. As I was reading back through different notes with committee of the whole back in 2015 different times, and I realized in reading back through some of the dialogue that happened in committee of the whole, even as far back as 2015, one of the things it was noted by staff that due to the expected low volume of pedestrian and bike traffic, and that Pemberton Farm Road East was going to be a shared roadway, and we were going to minimize impervious surfaces, for management of stormwater runoff. I realized that was just 8 years ago, and a lot has changed since then. So I'm, 8 years from now, how different will things be? And so I just want to acknowledge the work that has gone into this, and I appreciate the intention with what it's being done.
Thank you, Councillor Nightingale. And if I can add to that, and council or the committee expressed some thoughts around this in the last couple of meetings, and I appreciate staff's response to those concerns and bringing this report forward. I think it reflects what council was grappling with, and yeah, I appreciate staff's response on it. Anyone else? Okay, would somebody like to go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
Yeah, just if I can, Mayor, I'll just move option one.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Helmer, any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. McCray. We're on a 5.2, which is the daycare project nature playscape survey results. Ms. Burns, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Mayor Richmond and council. It's nice and warm in here today. Good afternoon. Purpose of this report is to inform the committee of the whole the survey results from the engagement plan for the relocation of the nature play park playscape structure. As council may recall, at the regular council meeting number 1580 held April 25th, Council Rosewood's report from the committee of the whole meeting number 243 held earlier in the day that Recreation Services would proceed with the implementation of the Nature Play Park relocation survey with some amendments to question 5, question 6, question 4, and question 9. All of those recommendations were taken into consideration and were included in the survey upon it being released. The survey ran from Monday, May 8th through until Monday, May 22nd. And we're really excited that we had 246 responses to the survey. So That's pretty good engagement. 98.4% of participants were from Pemberton or electoral area C. And then the 25.6% of the respondents live in the immediate area of the Pemberton District Community Center. So that's a fairly large percentage as well. In question 3, as you can see, I'm diving right into the responses. Question 3, we provided a couple of options for the demographics amongst the choices for participants to choose from. Our purpose here was to target parents of school-aged children, because that is what this playscape is designed for school-aged children, which is 5 to 12-year-olds. So 39.4% of respondents fell into this category. And then 36.6% of respondents fell into the category of having 0 to 4-year-olds, which will be potential future users of this amenity, which is fantastic that almost 80% of respondents are users or potential users of the playscape. We asked about their participation at the Pemberton District Community Center and surrounding area, and 93% responded that yes, they use it. We did find that question 5, as a result of making that response, if no, they don't use it, why not? We made that mandatory to respond. And that was, in hindsight, we probably shouldn't have, because there's a lot of wasted comments there. I'm sure you have probably seen for Q5. Question 6 was, what amenities do you use around the space and in the space? As you can see, they fall to library, green space, splash park, fitness center, programs, nature play park, skate park, BMX track, meeting spaces, youth center, and senior center. The rationale for ranking this question was to help us identify patterns of users of various spaces and activities offered at the community center and its surrounding grounds, with the hopes that maybe we can monopolize on some of these in the future. Question number 7 was designed to identify what respondents valued in their outdoor recreational areas. So the results were again ranked so that people had to answer. 1 was shade, which really is no surprise to me, as shade is something I value outside as well. Safety, leisure space, active play space, open space, multi-use space for people and pets, accessibility, line of sight, amenities being in close proximity, space for public assembly, defined space use, privacy, and other. Question 8 was a response to other, and you can find in Appendix C comments in relation to what they value as outdoor spaces. So yeah, it's valuable information for the recreation team for sure. I don't believe it's necessarily valuable from a results perspective, so some lessons learned there, but I've taken some value from it for sure, so that is good. 96.3% of respondents were familiar with the old location. I'm super impressed that 98% were familiar with the options presented, and I was super impressed that we had 409 hits on the information that was shared on Have Your Say, which means that 409 times information was downloaded from the Have Your Say about the information that we were sharing with everyone. So I was pleased to see that people were doing their research because that's what that answers for sure. Question 11 asks directly, which location option did they prefer? 47.6% chose option 1, 26.8% chose option 2, 25.6% chose option 3. Question 12 gets into tell us why you chose that option. So we were able to determine with responses what option everyone chose. And so this is where in Appendix D, you see the feedback from all of the respondents. And then in Appendix E, you see responses for those who chose option 3, other. And then we were able to deduce that there were kind of 7 different areas that people chose to choose when they said they chose option 3 as other. 1 being other in general, 2 being out at Dundas, 3 relocate hill or elsewhere on PVC green space, Pioneer Park, Gates Lake Industrial Park, 1 mile, and barn tied with this as a suggestion. So at this time, the relocation cost for the nature playscape will be included in the overall daycare project. And it's expected that the total grant will incur the costs of this. However, at this time, we're not clear on exactly what the costs for the daycare project will be and what contingency will be left over, as well as we still need to secure quotes and things like that for the relocation process and materials and things like that that will be involved in the replacement of this. But it is anticipated that we will be able to cover through that granting project. It's important that I recognize that the recreation budget is jointly supported by the village and SLRD Area C through the PVIS committee, and that it will be prudent for us to share with the PVIS committee any discussions and decisions that are made at this point. And then at this time, the recommendation is that the committee of the whole recommend to council which option is the preferred location for the nature playscape structure. So I open the meeting to questions. Mayor Richard.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Appreciate it. Before we get into comments, let's try to flush out any questions that there might be. Anybody got any questions on the survey or results? All right, let's open it up for comments then. Who's up first? I see Councillor Craddock's hand. I don't know if I'm missing anybody.
Just a question, it's got to go to PVIS.
Just the recommendation will be presented to them. As has everything that has happened to date has been presented to PVIS as information.
Okay, so the actual decision is council's to make, not PVIS's.
That I am not, that I would defer to Councillor or CAO Tracy.
I actually don't know 100% of the answer to that, given the fact that it is on village property. The amenity was initially obtained through a grant by the SLRD, but again, we're in the process of transferring everything over. So I think the direction we have taken is just to make sure that the committee there is informed of the decisions of council, and thus far there's been no objection or pushback. It's just making sure that it's transparent.
Okay, and I just wanted to be sure because we're still in the shared agreement.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
I think it's a good point, Councillor Craddock, and I'm not 100% sure. I mean, on one hand, now that we administer recreation, PVIS recreation decisions get ratified through this table, but the decision still has to be. I guess let's set ourselves a path where we can make sure that the decisions are consistent. Would be the ideal world, but like the actual formality of your question there, Councillor Craddock, it's a good one. Like I say, normally it goes the other way. PVIS meets, makes decisions like this, and then these recommendations come back, or these decisions come back to council for ratification. So, yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
so if we made a recommendation on what option we choose, subject to ratification from PVIS, would that make any sense, Mayor?
That sounds, and I'll look to staff to confirm that, but that sounds like a good way to go.
I think that's a good way to go.
Okay, then it appears that we went to the public to ask for their input. public's been pretty clear. Whether individually we agree with that or not is another story. But with that in mind, I move option one. That's what the community asked for.
Do I have a seconder?
No, I comment.
Yeah, normally we get a seconder for discussion, but yeah, sure, let's go ahead. Go ahead, Councillor Nightingale. It's all good.
Sorry, is the discussion over?
No, the discussion's
Oh,
far from
so I
over.
was like, what just happened
Generally,
there?
what the formality is, you get a mover.
Thank you. That's, I'm like, wait, but yeah, go ahead. I'll second having the discussion.
Great, thank you, and it doesn't mean, now it's not over. Go
That
ahead.
was really
Comment.
great.
It's all.
Go ahead, Councillor Nightingale.
Oh, I was gonna say, I had a question actually, was one of the risks with that was noted in the survey was that not having enough data or appropriate data that crosses all demographics. And I think was it 80% were of the people that responded were people with young children. So my question is that an accurate representation of the community? That's my first question. And then my second question is maybe a little more abstract, but with that 80% of those people, would they be impacted? Would their experience of the green space be impacted if the playscape was not there?
Sorry, can you, I didn't get that one. Can you say that one again somehow?
Would the experience of that 80%, the people with children, would their experience being an inclusive space, would it be minimized? Would their experience be minimized by the absence of the play structure?
If it wasn't there, would they be in?
Gotcha.
Right. My professional opinion. A community center needs play spaces that are appropriate for multiple demographics. So I believe that the majority of our community falls within, a 0 to 12-year-old family members. They have 80% of the respondents, 246 respondents is a lot for a survey that a municipality puts out. In my professional opinion, as a recreation professional, yes, I believe there would be negative impacts for the majority of users of that current space and how that space has been used, how I've seen it used. However, can I say that they will be negatively impacted? This was a tough one for me because I always see the glass as half full. So it'll just be different, right? So I can't say that there'll be negative feedback. I can't say what the community would experience per se. My experience in developing recreation spaces, outdoor spaces, indoor spaces, that you want to try and accomplish meeting the needs for the majority of the demographics of your community. So adding the playground back onto the green space where the community has suggested, I believe it will help us create a nice mix so that we can maintain use by all demographics. So there'll still be enough green space, I believe, for all the recreational activities from a leisure perspective, abilities to use that green space for meeting and greeting, reading. I think we can create an opportunity for leisurely walking programs for our senior demographic by creating a better walkable space around that green space, by creating access points that we would need to access the play space. So I believe that relocation is the right way to go. However, this isn't based on my feedback by any means. I think there's a lot of data and the decision has been put to council to make that decision. So.
And then just my second question, which was, is the data accurate? Is it an accurate reflection of the community?
I would say that we hit all areas of, and all demographics. I was impressed to see that there were individuals that do not have any children in their family at all. The library helped us push, I think, it's representative of the community in the sense that these are the members of your community that are concerned and paying attention to this particular topic at this time. So I do believe it is representative of the community based on how we're growing and family dynamics and things like that at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Councillor Helmer, go ahead.
Thanks for the report. What an enormous amount of work, and I think great respect for your last answer. The question around providing a variety of recreational different groups, I think that's a really important perspective to bring. I was struck with two things. One, there is a lot of bias in surveys, just generally speaking, right? It's not a randomized trial by any sense of the imagination. So I do have great hesitation to pin a decision on a non-randomized survey. I think we put it out there to get information, but I don't think we necessarily put it out there to say what the majority said we will go with. And I just wanted to put that out there from my perspective. I'm viewing it as excellent information to help inform a decision, but I'm by no means saying whatever the number is there, 48.4 or something means we go in that direction. Just for my own clarity, that's where I'm coming from. The second piece that I'm very struck by, especially in the comment section, is the number of local residents that have commented, and equally the number of residents outside of the area that provide comment. And to me, that's really a representation of how much our community has shifted since that playscape went in. And while I recognize the importance of providing, as you've said, this different age demographic, an opportunity to play or whatever it is, things have shifted. And if we were in this place today and this was being brought to us, would we make the same decision? Or are we just pinning everything on this decision because that's where we pulled it out of the ground from? And if I feel like we would probably make a different decision given the close proximity to residences now and the small space that we are working with. And what some of the other values are of our community, which really number one was shade there, which to me overwhelmingly says, okay, what we should be talking about is where do we plant more trees, right? Not where do we put in our next playscape in a very small space. So I hear you on everything, and I have a great respect for all the work that's gone into this. But I won't support the recommendation. Mine would be that we explore other options, and maybe it's in concert with PBS. Maybe it's taking the conversation back there to say, in your opinion, where is the best place for this?
Thank you. Councillor Ramsden, go ahead. You're on.
Sorry. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for the report. That was clearly a lot of work, and I really appreciate what you guys have done with it. And I think I'm going to echo a lot of what Councillor Helmer said. I think the report and the survey has done, I don't think it's given us, or we should take it necessarily as a clear-cut answer, but I think it's given us a lot of information. I will say a few things that stuck out to me is, if we're looking at the space as a multi-use space, there's several comments about, well, if we add it, it's catering very much to families with kids. And there's several comments about, having space where it's maybe a bit quieter and you can read a book or something like that. And if this is a center of our town, making sure that we're trying to make it as accessible and inclusive as possible. And again, just to Councillor Helmer's points, just the idea of maybe exploring other options and saying, does it have to be here? I recognize that's added expense and work, but that might be the best decision in this place. It might be well worth the resources that we have to put into it. Is saying maybe neither one or two is the right place.
Yeah.
Hi. Personally, I think we've gone around the table, so if I mean, I'll throw my comments in. I mean, this has been a really interesting conversation on a number of levels, just as we've grappled with different values and how to approach this and how to engage the community. I think, in my mind, the results of the survey, the survey was pretty broad and drew the attention of the people and the users that most use that space, but had a pretty good broad representation. You know, there was a pretty strong support for option one, although, you know, only not even half or more than half were looking at option two or another option. So I wouldn't say the survey led us to a super clear path forward. I feel like this thing is an important amenity. You know, I've struggled with it all along. You know, I lean towards what our experts told us when we started the process. That being the design, the architects, the landscape architects that brought this forward, and they talked about why they preferred option one, and I still support some of those ideas in terms of bordering the side. And so all that to say, I'm being a little wishy-washy here. You know, the results were not, like I say, painting a really clear path forward. But hearing the majority moving towards option one, having gone through the process, having heard from our experts, I'm comfortable supporting option one at this point. That's where I'm at, or supporting the motion as Councillor Caddick put it. Councillor Nightingale, is that your hand?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I have my questions. I'll just have my comments now. I see the green space. We need to consider the green space as a necessity for all people, not an amenity. I think it's an opportunity to support our community climate action plan in a different way. It's sort of a co-benefit, and one of the co-benefits environmentally is planting more trees and maintaining green space. And I think also socially, another co-benefit that supports our community climate action plan is to create inclusive spaces for all people of all demographics, doing a variety of active and passive activities. And so for that reason, I can't support putting another piece of infrastructure on that green lawn, knowing especially that there is going to be densification in that area for many people who live in apartment buildings, and the only green space that they have, whether they are across a variety of ages, that will be their green space. And I would like to see it utilized for all people. So I can't support option one or option two. I support moving it elsewhere in the community.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Caddick.
Yeah, I think when you look at the space that we have there, and with 34 more units opening up here in September, that's finished and people moving in. We have a project across the road that we're looking at up to 64 units eventually. And we're looking at another site on the corner next to the Mile 1 Cafe. None of those projects are bringing green space into the community. There's nothing on their sites for people to recreate on or to probably even throw a chair down and enjoy the sunshine. So I think the green area is especially important because we could be easily adding another 300 people to that area. And when you look at a sunny day and how many people are out enjoying the lawn and sun tanning or playing around, I think personally, I would like to see that preserved. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Howard, do you have your hand up?
No.
Okay. I want us to be cognizant of what I'll call the vote in a moment potentially, but I just want to be cognizant of process so we don't muck up any future decision making. And that is, if I call the question on option one and it dies, then option one is completely dead. I want to consider the comments around PVIS and where we would go with a secondary if this motion dies, where we would go with another one in terms of, again, this is more about process. I'm not trying to changing anybody's mind here. I just want to make sure that, you know, we talked about going to Peeves with this next. If we are going to option 3 as opposed to option 2 as the next motion, how does that get explored? And so, yeah, I just wanted to flag all that, that if I call the question on option 1 at this point and the motion dies, then that's done. Go ahead, Sheena, can you help me
No,
out?
we don't have a seconder on the motion.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, wait, sorry, okay, I missed that.
Councillor
Coercive.
Nightingale.
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, good. So yeah, I just, you know, I guess the only other way would be to bring it back. So I'm just trying to be cognizant of the comments around bringing it to Peeves. And if we are going to start looking at another option 3, you know, if we come up with, wow, there is not a really good option 3, can we come back to another option? So yeah, I just want us to be cognizant of that. Councillor Ramsden, if you have a comment?
Maybe just with your comments in mind, then maybe if it seems like the consensus around the table, and I'm just saying if it is exploring other options, then maybe what we do is leave the decision of 1 and 2 for now, and go however we word it, but basically look at option 3. And then if, you know, as you brought up the possibility, if it comes back and says, nope, there's absolutely nowhere else that we want to put this, it would be terrible, then we, you know, we still have option 1 and 2 to come back to.
So with that said, could we withdraw the motion and then put forward a motion to explore? I would say it sounds like a motion to explore other locations as well as to take this to Peeves. Councillor Caddick, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna withdraw my motion if the seconder is willing to approve.
Councillor Nightingale?
Yep.
Yeah, we're good. Okay, so the motion's been withdrawn, and would somebody like to make a subsequent motion? Councillor Helmut, go ahead.
I'll make a motion that option 3 be explored and referred to Peeves. Probably the most.
Okay.
Reasonable, yeah.
And I will second that.
Second, any further discussion? Call the question, any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone.
No big deal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, that's a recommendation to council, so
Yes.
it will come forward tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Appreciate your
Burns.
time. Thanks.
We appreciate your time, Ms. Burns. We know this has been a long, ongoing topic, and we appreciate the efforts you've made.
I've enjoyed the process and
Hang on.
I've got lots to say.
Good morning, idiots.
Happy to so what's that line?
All right, then I will look for a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Caddick. Any opposed? Motion carries. It's 4:15. I want to give us at least a half-hour break before the 5:30 meeting. Is everybody good to go back in camera for a little bit and carry on with that agenda?
Yeah.